Just 7 minutes ago, China made a massive move that could change the future of water security and geopolitics in Asia. They've started building the world's largest hydropower dam on the Yarlung Tsangpo River, which eventually flows into India as the Brahmaputra. This dam is not only set to generate a staggering 60,000 megawatts of power, but it could also give China control over the water supply for millions of people across India, Bangladesh, and beyond. So, stick around to learn about what's really going on and how this mega dam could impact millions of lives across Asia. The Yarlung Tsangpo is one of the largest and highest rivers in the world, flowing through some of the most politically sensitive areas on the planet. It starts in China's Qinghai Tibet Plateau, which is often referred to as the roof of the world. The river travels across southern Tibet before dramatically winding its way down into India, where it's known as the Brahmaputra, and then into Bangladesh. It's a lifeline for millions of people in India, Bhutan, and Bangladesh, providing essential water for drinking, agriculture, and energy production. What makes this river so important geopolitically is its location. It flows through Tibet, a region that's already a hotbed of tension between China and the rest of the world. From there, it crosses into India, specifically into Arunachal Pradesh, a region that China claims as its own. They call it South Tibet. So there's not just a natural conflict over water rights, but also a border dispute in the mix. You can see how this makes things even more complicated. The location of the dam is particularly interesting because it's being built at a place called the Great Bend, where the river makes a huge U-turn and drops sharply in elevation before it heads into India. This sharp drop in elevation makes it the perfect spot for hydropower generation because the fast-flowing water can be harnessed to produce massive amounts of electricity. But this also gives China a perfect spot to control the flow of water into India, which is a big concern. Matuo Megadam is going to be the largest hydropower project in the world. China is aiming for a whopping 60,000 megawatts of power generation. To give you some perspective, that's almost 3 times the power output of the Three Gorges Dam, which is currently the world's largest dam. We're talking about a massive structure that will have a huge impact on the region's energy supply, as well as its water resources. One of the key features of the dam is something called buffer storage. This means that the dam will be able to hold over 9 billion cubic meters of water during the peak monsoon season. That's a huge amount of water, and it's not just sitting there for no reason. This buffer allows China to control the water flow during different seasons. During the dry season, when water is scarce, they can release water to ensure a steady supply. But, and this is the scary part, during the rainy season, they could hold back water and then release it all at once, potentially causing floods downstream in India and Bangladesh. This kind of control gives China a lot of power, not just in terms of energy generation, but also over the lives of millions of people who depend on this river for their daily needs. India has every reason to be worried about China's dam-building activities on the Yarlung Tsangpo. After all, this river becomes the Brahmaputra once it flows into India, and millions of people rely on it for everything from drinking water to irrigation. The Brahmaputra is especially important in India's northeastern states like Assam and Arunachal Pradesh, which are some of the country's most fertile and water-dependent regions. The big concern here is that China could start using this dam as a geopolitical tool. By controlling the flow of water, China could theoretically create artificial droughts during the dry season or cause massive floods during the rainy season. For a country like India, which is already vulnerable to natural disasters like floods, this could be catastrophic. What makes things even more complicated is the political tension between the two countries. India and China have had several border clashes in recent years, especially in the Galwan Valley. So, the fear is that China might use its control over the river as a bargaining chip in future disputes. To counter this, India has proposed building its own 11,000 megawatt hydropower project on the Siang River, which is a tributary of the Brahmaputra. This project is supposed to give India more control over its water supply and help balance out China's influence upstream. The project has faced a lot of challenges, including opposition from local communities who fear that the dam will disrupt their way of life. There are also environmental concerns, as building a dam of this size could have significant impacts on the local ecosystem. Despite these challenges, India is pushing forward with the project. because it sees it as a strategic necessity. By building its own dam, India hopes to gain more control over its water supply and lessen the impact of any actions China might take upstream. This shift in strategy is significant because it marks a departure from India's previous approach to water management. In the past, India has been more focused on negotiating water-sharing agreements with its neighbors. But now, with China's growing control over the Yarlung Tsangpo, India is taking a more assertive stance by building its own infrastructure. But it's not an easy fix. Building a dam of this size takes time, and in the meantime, India remains vulnerable. If you think this is the first time China has used water as a geopolitical tool, think again. China has a history of using its control over rivers to influence its neighbors. A perfect example of this is what happened on the Mekong River. Back in 2021, China cut the water flow of the Mekong by 50% for 3 weeks. They said it was for maintenance, but the timing was suspicious, and it affected millions of people living in countries like Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. These countries rely on the Mekong for their agriculture, fishing, and drinking water. When China suddenly reduced the water flow, it caused a ripple effect. Farmers couldn't irrigate their crops, fish populations dwindled, and water reservoirs ran dangerously low. And the scary part? China did this without any warning. So, when you hear about India's concerns over the Yarlung Tsangpo, they're not unfounded. China has already shown that it's willing to use water as a tool to exert control over its neighbors. It's not just the Mekong either. In 2019, China's dams in the upper Mekong basin held back more water than ever before, even though the region experienced above-average rainfall. This led to severe droughts downstream, impacting countries like Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. It's clear that when China controls the upstream flow of a major river, the downstream countries are at its mercy. So when you look at what's happening with the Yarlung Tsangpo, it's easy to see why India, Bangladesh, and Bhutan are so worried. They've seen what China has done with the Mekong, and they don't want to be in the same situation. The fear is that China could use this same playbook on the Brahmaputra, and the consequences could be just as devastating. When you build a massive dam, like the one China is constructing on the Yarlung Tsangpo, it doesn't just affect the flow of water, it has huge environmental and social consequences as well. Let's start with the environmental side of things. Dams can drastically alter the ecosystem of a river. For example, when China built dams on the Mekong, it caused fish populations to plummet, which had a devastating impact on local communities that rely on fishing for their livelihood. Similarly, the Yarlung Tsangpo is home to a rich ecosystem that could be severely impacted by the construction of this megadam. Changes in water flow can disrupt the natural migration patterns of fish and other wildlife. Not to mention, if China decides to release large amounts of water during the rainy season, it could cause floods downstream, destroying habitats and farmlands in India and Bangladesh. Then there's the social impact. Dams of this size often require the relocation of local populations, which can lead to a whole host of problems. In China, large-scale dam projects have already displaced millions of people, and this project is likely to do the same. On the Indian side, the proposed Siang Dam has faced significant opposition from local communities who fear that it will disrupt their way of life. In 2017, the Siang River, which is a tributary of the Brahmaputra, turned black due to contamination. Local Indian officials blamed China, claiming that upstream construction activities were polluting the river. This incident highlighted just how interconnected the water systems of India and China are, and how easily one country's actions can impact the other. The fear is that China could use this control to pressure India in future disputes. For example, during the Doklam standoff between China and India, China abruptly stopped sharing hydrological data about the Brahmaputra with India, despite previous agreements. This kind of behavior shows that China is willing to use water as a bargaining chip in its geopolitical dealings with India. One key issue to consider in the construction of the Motuo Megadam is China's long-term strategic goals. This isn't just about building another dam, it's part of a broader strategy to secure control over vital resources, which includes water and energy. As China grows economically and militarily, its energy demands have skyrocketed. Hydropower is a critical element in meeting these energy needs, especially as the country pledges to reach carbon neutrality by 2060. unlike coal or other fossil fuels. Hydropower offers a renewable energy source that aligns with China's green goals. However, this also allows China to cement control over its most critical natural resources, thereby increasing its geopolitical leverage. The role of Tibet in this strategy can't be overstated. Tibet is often referred to as the water tower of Asia, because it is the source of major rivers flowing into some of the most densely populated regions on Earth. By controlling Tibet and building massive infrastructure projects there, China not only asserts its influence over the plateau, but also gains dominance over the water supply to India, Bangladesh, and Southeast Asia. Another aspect often overlooked is how this dam could affect China internally. Although China's outward-facing actions are grabbing global attention, this project also fits into a domestic narrative of enhancing national pride. Large-scale projects, like the Motuo Megadam, help rally nationalist sentiment and show the world that China can achieve engineering feats on a scale that few others can match. The Three Gorges Dam was similarly framed as a symbol of Chinese strength and progress. But while China gains prestige with these projects, it's also facing rising internal concerns about the environmental and social costs. In many parts of China, damming rivers has led to ecological disasters, affecting biodiversity, causing landslides, and displacing millions. The Yangtze River, for example, has seen its fish populations decline drastically due to dam constructions. Many Chinese citizens and environmentalists are becoming increasingly vocal about the negative consequences of these massive projects, which can lead to long-term ecological damage. Furthermore, China's approach to water resource management raises ethical questions. Can any nation justifiably control a shared water resource, like a transboundary river? China's ability to manipulate the flow of water with the Motuo Megadam puts it in a morally ambiguous position. What do you think about China's Megadam? Do you think it's going to lead to more cooperation or create bigger conflicts in the region? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe button to stay updated on more global news and stories like this.